Hey there, welcome to another edition of Listen Up. My name's Drew Hopkins. Glad that you're with us today. Our guest today is Mr. Jeremy Funk. He came in from Denver, Colorado. Jeremy is one of the leading people with innovation, with technology. And what we always look at on this show are people that are pushing the envelope to be able to find ways that they can get out and make connections with different people and to really find ways to connect companies, employees, and to really move the needle, so to speak, whenever it comes to making technology and work staff work in unison together. What I did find out, though, on your plane ride here today, I did find out that you now are kind of working alongside, maybe in some sort of competition with our company here. And I just want to tell you, if you have any inkling of being on this show and spreading some crazy agenda that your show you might take over this, I'll tell you one thing, you got another thing coming to you, buddy. This isn't your thing that you're going to be taking over, and I'll be sure that this isn't going to be one of those things you can kind of come in here, you can put down agenda, and you can say, no, if you're looking at me, you're that maybe one of those things that this guy over here, I just can't even. So I hear you like the Boston Red Sox. Love them. So you grew up on the East Coast.
Yeah, man. Why don't I just give you my story and
for sure.
Audience can get to know me a little bit.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Funk, born at my home, at the home that my parents still live in right now. I like to, when we go home, show my kids like this is where I was actually came out of my mom's. Rumney, New Hampshire, population 1,600 or so, and I think it's been 1,600 forever. Just one of those flatline places. Country, a couple hours north of Boston, a couple hours south of the Canadian border. Very beautiful, white mountains. Nice. Loved it. Oil and gas as a career or profession was the furthest thing from my mind.
What is the main, the main job that's there?
Man, I mean, the further north you get, it's trickier. There's a lot of lumber.
Okay.
And certainly, I guess that's a hot business right now, right?
That's right.
My dad worked at the university, so you do have some schools around there. There's a lot of private schools, prep schools that people send their kids to.
Right.
A lot of blue collar work, to be honest. Like the jobs that I would have when I would come home during breaks were, in the summers I'd wait tables, and in the winters I would work for the Plymouth State University and have a plow, have a plow on a truck that they give me and drive it around town and plow the campus. So, I mean, those were the types of jobs that were primarily available.
And only child or?
Middle child of three.
No.
I've got an older sister, a younger sister.
Nice.
And,
are they still around there, or have they moved off to their own respective?
Yeah, my parents are still in the same house. They'll
That's
probably
amazing.
be there till their last day on earth. They love it. My older sister lives in Vermont, just outside of Stowe. Really beautiful area.
Vermont's awesome.
They're awesome. And my little sister is married, has a kid, and lives in Chapel Hill or Durham, North Carolina. So
Durham's awesome.
my wife went to Duke.
No kidding.
So yeah, there's a lot of Duke connections nearby here too. We're just down the road from
Chesapeake.
Yeah, your old alma mater, Chesapeake, and Aubrey McClendon made the beautiful campus here to look a little bit like Duke. That's the best campus I've seen.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Best campus I've seen.
It's the only place that we went to, a few years ago, we went to Notre Dame and saw Notre Dame's campus, and it was amazing too. And I don't know, between that and those Ivy League schools and everything, holy cow! I mean, they're just gorgeous to look at.
Did you go to a football game in Notre Dame?
We weren't able to.
Okay.
But that is on the bucket list for sure. It's an amazing place.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I'd also love to go to Wrigley, but we'll get into baseball. We'll get into baseball. We talked about that. We'll get into baseball. So yeah, family still on the East Coast. I met my wife. Well, I guess I can get to my wife at a later point in the story. So grew up in New Hampshire, a little bit of a country bumpkin, but also Jewish. I went to a high school of 800 or so people, and I was the only Jewish kid. Once my sister, who was a senior when I was a freshman, was out, the last few years of high school, I was the only practicing Jew. So it was an interesting dynamic growing up that I'd be sort of in the sticks in the country all year round, and then in the summer I would go to Camp Ramah, New England, sleepaway Jewish summer camp for 2 months.
Holy cow!
Yeah, for 2 months.
So your whole family is Jewish?
Yeah, My dad's side, my mom converted. Her
Okay.
side was Greek Orthodox, lived in Boston. My dad was from Jersey. His dad was a rabbi. So different, I mean, grandparents didn't go to each other's wedding, the kids' weddings. They had to have two separate weddings. The times were different in the
They really were.
early 70s, right? But yeah, man, that was really an interesting way to grow up. So I had these friends from camp, right? So a bunch of Jewish kids, and then friends from home in the New Hampshire area, right? So graduated from high school 1998, went to Brandeis, which is also like a very Jewish school. I think it's like 60-something% Jewish, which probably I did that to counteract the fact that I was like the only Jewish kid in my high school.
Maybe so.
But also it was the best school I got into, like by far.
Nice.
And was just convenient. 2 hours from my house, right outside of Boston. The Celtics practiced there. It was a beautiful, beautiful campus and very challenging. Difficult education. Good for me to get exposed to kids that had more challenging high schools and probably tougher testing and teachers and more competition. To then push me out kind of into the world. And I mean, my senior year of college, I took the LSATs. Like I just figured I'd probably be a lawyer. I like to talk. I had a bunch of relatives, who were lawyers and they'd done very well. It just seemed like a pretty clear path. But I was in a fraternity, ZBT, and I was noticing that like the guys who were more like me that majored in history, American studies, sociology, they got jobs selling tech or selling pharmaceuticals. They were like driving really nice cars that their companies gave them, and they were making all this money and had nice watches, and they're like 23, 24. I'm like, what is this? Like most people your age are still like going to school or something. Like, what are you doing? They're like, yeah, I sell, you name it, Viagra, this piece of software, data storage. So it hit my radar early, like around 2000, during that first tech boom, that technology was going to be here to stay.
Right.
So graduated from college, kind of putzed around, waited tables for about a year, and then moved to Boulder, Colorado, sight unseen, Halloween 2003. Two of my best friends from high school, they were on the East Coast as well. They're like, let's just do something different, go west, young man. Went west, and somehow settled on Boulder. I think one dude wanted Steamboat, the other guy's like, gotta be Denver. And I was like, I've heard that Boulder's cool.
Okay, we'll split the difference, go to Boulder.
Right here, yeah, we'll go here. And it was fantastic, lower cost of living, at least to rent at that point, and lots of tech jobs. So I knew, like, my plan was I want to get into technology sales because it seems like this is a growing profession. I'm not as interested in the medical, pharmaceutical stuff.
Right.
So moved to Colorado and got a job late 2003 in data storage. So this was a point where I would sell a box that was like a terabyte for $20,000. So just to like wrap your head around that, right? I love telling younger people that see that, because what do you get on your like the iCloud? A terabyte's like $2.
Exactly. Yeah.
This was like a big, heavy physical block that got hot, right? You needed something to cool it down, and people were buying it. Right? They were big deals. Data storage was a thing. So did that for about a year and a half, made 85 phone calls a day, really cut my teeth. Yeah, a lot of rejection.
Right.
But people, I think, respected my hustle. They're like, this guy's going to go somewhere. And I started reading my own press clippings. I'm like, yeah, I don't need to make 85 calls a day. I can get a better job. And I went to a company called Rally Software, which, this is so stupid. I was 25 years old. And I was probably employee number 10.
Right.
And this company was clearly good. Like they were getting lots of inbound leads and the people seemed really smart, but I didn't like my boss. And I felt like he had a kid who was like 16 or 17 and I was only 25. So he sort of talked to me the way he talked to his kid. And it's like, no, talk to me like you talk to the 47-year-old salesperson. We literally have the same job. You hired me to do that. And of course I don't know how to do it. I have 2 years of experience, right? But was closing deals, doing great. The company raised $8 million. And of course, foolish me, I was like, well, whatever, I hate my boss, I'm gonna leave. And I went to like a completely downtrodden company, got laid off from there, went to another place. 6 months later, I'm like, oh God, I don't like this at all. And thank goodness, in 2007, Ali Frank's Gem Resourcing, one of the best recruiters in Denver, hit me up and said, hey, I've got a really interesting opportunity for you. It's an inside sales position, so a little bit of a step back from closing deals, but the phone's ringing off the hook. They got a lot of opportunities. It's selling accounting software to oil and gas companies. I was like, I don't know anything about accounting.
Sign me up.
I don't know anything about oil and gas, but they were paying a lot of money. So I took it, late 2007, my first day on the job. I feel like I've looked it up before. It was like $133 per barrel oil. Natural gas was like $11.
I remember those days. Oh, yes.
Yeah, you were down here, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just exactly like what I think you're going to say, just high on the hog, and then things change.
Like, I'm not kidding when I say this, but there was a group of us that we come in the morning and we close a deal or do some business or not, and then go to Wahoo's Fish Tacos for lunch and have a margarita and stop at the liquor store to buy a nice bottle.
Right.
Come back in the afternoon, work a little bit more, and then, hey, here. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, 9 months later, when oil was like $40 a barrel, that shit changed. It changed.
Yes, it definitely. Yeah, those are some of the things that, like, I know that whenever I talk to like people older in the business and whether they're talking like, oh, the roaring 80s and everything, and how things were just absolutely, it was a lawless wasteland, like it was just absolutely crazy. And we hear stories in Oklahoma City of people pouring champagne into like a cowboy boot and like passing it around, and like it was just this opulence with that business. And then as quickly as it starts, like mid 80s, whenever the crash happened, I feel like whenever it was kind of like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, right to the late 2000s, and we all were like kind of experiencing like the high of that.
Yeah.
I was just like you said, I was just at Chesapeake, and I was seeing everything was just thrown at us, and we were working hard, but we were also 100% playing hard as well.
Yeah.
And we were getting to, and it was just like, this is it comes with the territory of you guys are making amazing deals, and we're up and coming, and we're becoming this just insanely popular company.
Yep.
And we need to be able to play like it too. And so I completely hear you on playing. And then the second that you see $40 oil and you see sub $1 natural gas, all of a sudden this realization hits, and you're like, oh man, you're telling me this isn't all the time for the rest of my life? I mean,
why can't it be like it was? It was so good.
Yeah. So you saw this kind of high, you saw it get to a low, but you still saw that these companies needed the software. And because it sounds like the different software companies and everything, 80 calls a day. From the very first time that someone introduced me to your name, they were like, this man, very well connected, like knows a lot of people, And it sounds like that was kind of the start of this whole being very well connected, knowing the right people and knowing how to take it, even whenever the times were a little tough.
Yeah, no, people are important to me. Relationships are important to me. I really, really enjoyed my time at Bolo. And I've always said this since, that I was incredibly lucky with this chain of events that went down, where I went to Bolo and worked with a bunch of brilliant people, great people. The product was a little bit archaic, but it worked, and people still buy it today, right? Accounting software. And toward the end of the time there, it was pretty obvious, the end of my time, I was there for 3 years, the company was going bankrupt, they had to sell, and it looked like P2 was going to buy them. And at that point, P2 was just like the arch rival. Like, I couldn't even think about going to P2. It was like, oh, don't even make me try to re-interview for my job, okay? We've been beating those guys in deals. And I wasn't at a place to do it. And I think a lot of the people at Bolo sort of had that mindset, right? That was the competitor. So what happened was, a lot of those people ended up getting jobs at oil and gas companies that use Bolo. So all of a sudden, I had some contacts with the industry, but mostly within the company that I worked with. And now they're accounting manager, controller, assistant controller, financial reporting at various publicly traded oil and gas companies in Denver and Houston and Oklahoma and so on. So it really was able to hatch early on. And now those are some deep-rooted relationships.
It's great.
That feels very familial with the Bolo crowd, which is special. 2010, 2011, went to a company called Energy Navigator. They were a successful company in Canada and wanted to bring some of their solutions to the US and establish market share. AFE workflow, so started to learn a little bit more about the operations side of the house, the drilling completion side, and what goes into being able to drill a well, which is a very expensive project in many cases. And Value Navigator, which was in their mind a tool that could compete with Aries, which is of course the big behemoth down here. They do reserves management, forecasting, kind of everything in that space. The AFE piece was a success. The Value Navigator piece was not so much. Was there for close to 3 years and went to a company called Seven Lakes. Seven Lakes was a really interesting company because it was all Indians. Right, so they found me on LinkedIn somehow, and they're like, you seem like a guy that would be good at selling our stuff. I'm like, okay. So flew out to California, and they demoed all their stuff, and it reminded me of the earlier tech companies that I worked at that had the beautiful user interfaces.
Right.
Slick, easy to use, iPad-based stuff. And I was like, man, like.
And what was this software? This was what?
It was a variety of stuff. I mean, they really started out as a consulting services company, sort of like an outsourced dev shop.
Gotcha.
With oil and gas expertise. But eventually they had things like iPad-based field data capture, sort of before that was a thing. A lot of like integrated business intelligence and reporting, so estimate versus actual, lease operating statements in a very visual and drill downable fashion.
Nice.
And did really well. I mean, I think that's where most of my contact base came from, I think, because the first 2.5 years there, I think it was the 968th fastest growing privately held company in the U.S.
No kidding.
Yeah, it went from like,
cool.
$1 million or two.
How many people work there?
Man, at its peak, it must have been 90 or 100. But, it went from, when I started, it must have been at 1 or 2 million, and within 2 years got to almost 15 million. So,
pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was exciting, right? So I was traveling all the time, right? A lot of whining and dining, made some great contacts here in Oklahoma City. And the company received $20 million in Series A funding. And I got to learn firsthand what happens, which is all of a sudden you're working for the CEO one day and then you have two bosses the next, right? So culture shifts, company goes away from kind of the services creative piece and more toward kind of a machine-like product. And it's done pretty well. I mean, they've been a good company. Was there for 4 years, left in 2017. And that was really kind of when I got the inkling to want to do contract sales and marketing, but it took me a few years to actually go about it.
Right. But from what I hear, the experiences that you've gained, all the way back, like all of these different things that you've done since initially being in Boulder, grow that base of the people, see the different technology that's out there, see how you can properly like put yourself and be the fit for those companies, or give them an idea of what they need to help be successful. And that really sounds like you found your niche with that, and that's pretty novel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it pays to work at a lot of different companies in the energy tech space. At least for me, was able to hone my expertise around a number of things.
We just had our president Wade Brawley, or our CEO Wade Brawley. He spoke at a deal earlier last week, and he was talking about like how the baby boomers generation, like it was a big deal for them. Of like even their parents. I think even their parents were. You would find the place that would be your job right whenever you got out of college, and that was your one job until the day you got your gold Rolex and you retired and you shook everybody's hand down the line and you went out and the new guy came in, and they said like the next generation being, I guess, kind of the baby boomers and like the high-end generation X, they were like they will work between like 3 and 5 different jobs in their lifetime, and that's like kind of normal for them. The like late generation X and like kind of the hybrid millennial, like after that, and that's where I am too. They said between like about 5-7 jobs, and that's totally normal. And they were talking about like the younger generation, like the Barretts and the other guys, of you not working 5 to 7 jobs. It could be something like 7 jobs at a time. You could be doing these at the same time. You could be working, like we've seen with the pandemic, you could be working from your house, 4 different companies as a contractor, multiple different places, and have the same level of like you feel good about yourself, feel like you're contributing to these different companies, feel like you're making a difference, and you're actually seeing the bottom line change for those groups. Good people find good work.
No doubt. I mean, I think there's a lot we can learn from the younger generation.
For sure.
We talked about this before we started the recording, but the 2 people that work with me right now are 23 and 28. And, I tell them, okay, do it like this because this is how I did it. And they're like, we can create all these efficiencies. Let's do it like this. I'm like, well, then let's do it like that, right? Like, this is just what I know, man. I'm not going to force that on you. You take that and make it yours.
Man, like, my biggest deal is I 100% have like that Peter Pan syndrome of like, I'm never going to grow up. And like, yeah, I'm hitting 40 this year, and like,
Nice.
like the gray hair, and like, as we're seeing I'm devolving into something
You're a
way
man.
not okay with. Yeah, but like seeing like where we were at Chesapeake and where we were like in these different stages, and now like working, you know, in this job that we've got now at Land Information Services, and seeing so many young people come in. And like, I know that at Chesapeake we had the same thing of where we would come in and we would have so many different ideas and different ways that we would say, hey, you know, I think we can do things better. I think we can do things a little bit better. And I always felt like the older crowd, or the middle-aged crowd to the older crowd, like there was some resistance that was met with. But now I see it from my side of, I meet immediately, like initially with resistance, but
Right.
I have definitely changed my tune in the last like few years. I'm like, that was the thing that I know helped make us successful at Chesapeake in certain areas. And I was like, it is insane to think that like my mindset is going to be the right mindset all the time. Like, you have to be open to that sort of stuff, and it's so fun too, you know?
The tools literally didn't exist when you were at Chesapeake.
That's right.
When I was earlier in my career.
That's exactly right.
For automation or optimization or routing by exception, right? I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that are available now, or people have just discovered technology, or it's come along so fast that we couldn't do, right? So we probably did it the best that we could then. It's just that now there's more tech available, and that continues to change the game for everyone.
Well, I think what you're saying, and this is one of those things that like pivots the conversation exactly what I was hoping that we'd get in to talk about too.
For sure.
Of those first years at Chesapeake. So like my first job there, like lease analyzing, like I had the two on either side of my one monitor, which like I don't think even kids today would understand that back in the day we would only have one monitor in front of us.
Right.
You know, like it's got to be like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But we would have the one monitor in front of us that was with the big like the CPU unit on the side, and then I had 2 plastic like things on either side that I would put leases on, and I would have to take the one program that we were using. I'd have to take like the new lease and I'd put it in the system, and I'd put all the header level information in, you know, and like I'd have to make sure, you know, the terms were right and the person's name was right, and you know, like how everything was up, and a few of the provisions that were put in there, but it was all 100% manually put in by hand.
Oh man.
And so you could copy and paste, and you could have like a maybe a Word document on the side with all of those that like were the standard way, and so you copy and you'd paste it. But like we would feel like super good if we were like, I got 17 done today or something like that.
That's a lot.
And you would be like, boy, I accomplished a lot. And was it mind numbing? Yes, it was mind numbing, but boy, I was really rocking and rolling with it. And like, so we look now, and the software that you've become very familiar with, the software that we're really familiar with, we look and we're like, if you can't do like 80 leases in a day, or a half day even, like you would be falling behind just because of how easy it is now. And like
Tools for that.
The AI for what it is, the machine learning for what it is, the different ways that like these things are reading these PDFs, and the ways that it's being able to ingest that data, it's insane now.
Yeah.
So what have you seen like in your oil and gas, and like the accounting and the land and everything that you've had your experience in? What have kind of been the things that you've seen that have been the biggest eye-openers to you, or the things that you're kind of excited about for as we kind of shift into that more technology-focused future?
Yeah, I mean, a lot, really. I think cloud has probably been the biggest benefit that this industry has embraced, because it existed. Like, trust me, it existed well before oil and gas decided that it exists. But it's really changed the way that you do business. And fundamentally, I think the areas that I'm most excited about are operating by exception, and then any sort of real-time data access for the masses. Like, I think that's the oil and gas industry might not be ready to fully embrace that, but I think we're getting to a point where production data is going to be real-time and available, like it is in every other industry, right? There's so much automation on these assets right now there are means of sharing this level of data, and I think it would be awesome if we move toward a more sort of real-time analysis of oil and gas assets. So I think we'll get there. I mean, fundamentally, I think operating by exception, the manufacturization of the oil and gas industry has to happen, right? Start treating vendors and lease operators, pumpers, like plumbers, right? Or like a group that you can be very nimble with and route them as needed from the command center or even just from their app. And not have just a prescribed route that you take every day because that's the route that you take. So really creating efficiencies, preventing downtime, leveraging the artificial intelligence and machine learning that we have to predict some of those failures, really dial that in and become as efficient as possible.
For sure. And one of the other people that we've talked to, and I believe is going to be like 2 down the road guests on this video cast or whatever the heck we're calling it, but his idea was very similar to what you're talking about, of everything automation, everything being able to do it by the phone. And like one of the things, and I don't want to give away his deal, before he's talking about it, but like we would always get calls like at Chesapeake, and we still even get them now, like doing owner relations for companies, of where like surface owners are like, hey, one of your people came on the land today, like my farmland, and the company says, yeah, well, we don't know who that was. We don't really know what time that, like we'll call around. We'll call to the manager that's out in the field.
Sure.
They call and they're like, hey, did anybody go out there? And they're like, oh, let us check with Ron. Ron knows. And they call Ron and he's like, I'm off today, but it could have been Kevin, and Kevin could have gone out there and left it, and there was no, and this guy was like, we are at such a level nowadays of where you could do geofencing, just basically you make one of those geofences. If one person's cell phone goes through that geofence, it pings even the landowner, unless the landowner, Dave Smith, is on your property. He came on at 9:15 a.m. He left at 10:15. It's there. The technology's there.
Oh, like it's definitely there.
Here, and so many other, exactly what you said. So many other industries use it just at their beck and call. Like every bit of their day they're using that. But it's frustrating for me a lot because I feel like I love the oil and gas industry, and it is my favorite thing. But I feel like we're held back and we're hampered by so much of it's always been done this way, and why change it if it works? And I'm like, but it's not really working that great. Like, it could work better.
It has to work better, right? I mean, because I think that as you see more and more companies show up and are tech savvy and tech reliant, I mean, if they start having better results, it'll start to show through. I mean, EOG is really a prime example. Like, EOG Resources is probably the Apple of the oil and gas industry in the US, right? They always have amazing initial production, and they always hit decline curves, and their numbers are always really solid, right? Fantastic organization. Also one of the stronger IT groups in oil and gas, and they've made a conscious decision to invest in that. They don't do a lot of business with external vendors. They keep tabs on what's going on. They have their own data science team, and they work it out. Obviously, that's not possible for every company to do, right? Sure. So the companies that don't have the ability to do that need to find the most efficient ways of leveraging tech. And I think, Drew, in the defense of the operators, there's a lot of noise, right? There's a lot of things that sound the same.
Right.
I think we on the vendor side could do a better job of really explaining what these products do in detail, instead of just going in and saying we have the best bread slicer ever.
Right.
Give us a piece of, give us a loaf and we'll cut it, and you can see. A lot of things overlap and sound very similar, particularly if you don't spend all of your time in the energy tech world. So we do have to be cognizant of that, and how we message, package, and present these solutions to the industry has to be, trustworthy, and it has to be something people can digest.
For sure. Like, that's one of those things of where, and we look, and from like this vendor perspective, I look out and we see so many hundreds of oil and gas companies out there that are all doing things a little bit different. They all have that senior level management or that middle level management that's coming from some different, everybody's had their own experiences, and either they believe in the technology that is pushing forward, or they believe in what they've had, they're very okay with, that they've rocked and rolled with for the last
worked.
X amount. Yeah, if it's not broke up, or if it's not broke, there's no reason to fix it.
Sure.
But like it's one of those things where you're right. We have to be able to get that across and show them, how are we going to go forward with this? How are we going to make technology be something that we all can leverage? And how is, if we are talking about piecemealing a production system, an accounting system, a land system, and putting all those together, what's the right mixture for each one of these hundreds of companies?
And I think it's a combination, right? You don't just want to totally get away from the systems that people have used and fully understand, but there's still an evolution piece. And I don't know if the older generation is opposed to embracing. I think it's like, just give us the training and the change management then.
Right.
Don't just give us the product, because I'm not going to do anything different. Just do it in spreadsheets or the way I've done it for 25 years, and I don't blame anyone for thinking that way. And I think the irony, and I've said this a bunch, I really like to stay on, I guess, what I would consider the bleeding edge of energy tech, particularly oil and gas. But like, if you tried to rip Salesforce out of my hands, we'd have some issues, bro. 18 years on that tool, and it's the Cadillac, so I'm not messing with it. Somebody could tell me there's a less expensive Zoho or some other CRM, and it does almost all the same things. Like, no, I'm paying more for Salesforce. And that's just the reality of it. Yeah. Because it works, and because it can attract people that have used it, since it's such a common thing, and I don't have to worry about getting them trained when they come on board. So same thing with like an Aries or a ProCount or what is it in the land world, maybe like a Quorum Land that people have been using forever and ever. It's like, well, they've tied their skills and their career and their compensation to that product. And whether or not that's real or not doesn't matter if that's the perception that they have. So,
for sure.
I mean, it's a fundamental challenge, but it has to be, the tech is then so user-friendly.
Right.
So easy, so efficient, right? Like it has to be value add across the board. Just simply putting another tool in because it costs a little less money isn't going to be the play. It has to give you a little bit more.
No, for sure. And so that's one of those things where, depending, and it's each one of these different work environments and each one of these different groups of people completely different. And then we had like the pandemic come in this last year, and that threw off these different staffs that were 40 deep or 20 deep, or even 10 in some cases, get cut in half, or they get completely like changed up, and it changes the dynamic of those people that are used to these different programs. And all of a sudden you get people cut, and now half of the group isn't comfortable with it, and things are changing. What have you kind of experienced in the last year and a half? I feel much more optimistic now than I have in a long time. But man, it was a crazy deal of being able to see that happen and see how it affected these different companies. And what we saw is people really were focused on leveraging on, hey, we have maybe less of a headcount. What can we do more with our programs, or how can we do more training? How can we understand it better, and how can we get more out of this with a smaller staff?
Man, I mean, you simply can't do the same things, right? I mean, if you're, especially if it's a person-heavy application that we're talking about, if you just get rid of your GIS team, it doesn't matter if you have a mapping system that works. A land person usually isn't going to know how to operate a GIS system. They certainly won't know how to do it at the expert level of a GIS person.
Right.
So, the fundamental challenges, I think, were, number one, decisions started to go one level up the food chain, and the decision was generally, we don't want to spend money. So I think what we saw in the last year was more sophisticated buying on the operator side, more of a need to see value propositions, total cost of ownership. What is this really going to cost me? And probably a little bit more thorough investigation before making a technology decision. And I think overall that's good. It hasn't necessarily driven the prices down. It's made sure that the value of what you're providing ties back to getting money back in the door for the company.
Boy, so, that's the truth.
Back office, optimization, some level of outsourcing, as you know, is a big deal.
Right.
Company emerges from bankruptcy. You can't just do it the same way you did before, nor can you just grab all of the people that you laid off
bring them back on.
Like, that's just not the reality. So you have to figure out how do you do something different. I think it's companies are getting creative with how they do it. I think people are stretching their skill sets more and now understanding and embracing the Power BIs and the Alteryx and the reporting and BI types of tools on their own without having to send it to the applications guy to work something up.
Boy, we saw a lot of companies that like we're working with of saying, okay, like, and it wasn't as one day to the next of being like, okay, we didn't do this day, we're doing it. But it was more on, like where you're saying, Power BI, Spotfires, all those different things of, please put this in a way that we can tangibly see how we're getting value out of this.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's not that we don't believe the process, show us how. And so we would say, well, here. And they're like, oh, yes. Like those things are powerful and those are making a big difference to be able to show people.
Big time. Now, and I think other industries have done that, but oil and gas, because it's so boom or bust, has been, well, when it booms and you're not too busy, you buy stuff, you don't care what it costs. And when it busts, you don't buy anything.
That's right.
So, I mean, at least with tech, right? So it turns into this, like, we're at a different place right now. I think we're at kind of a sweet spot price-wise. If the companies are either well hedged or not exposed, or fully exposed, I should say, are in a good spot right now from a sales standpoint, right? They have to be. $60-something WTI is a good thing for these companies. But coming off of what we just dealt with over the last almost 18 months,
right.
I mean, we've kind of been in this down cycle for a while. Really, 2014, end of 2014, beginning of 2015, we started to see it. In 2016, it crashed. And it hasn't like really fully come out. So we could see this super cycle take off a little bit, which would truly be the best thing, the biggest boon for energy tech, because companies won't be hiring people back at the same rate, and they still have to keep up and maintain organizational speed, right?
For sure.
So what do, right? You have to pick the right pieces of technology and get forward-thinking people to use it.
Exactly. So that kind of makes me think of, so we've tried to figure out how these last few years of how we said, like from the early 2000s to the mid 2000s to the late, having a pandemic thrown in there, having crashes thrown in, there's a lot of things you can plan for, there's a lot of things you can't. In planning for the future and planning for like the next 3 to 5 years for and I'm not just saying just oil and gas, for the energy space.
Sure.
Because we really do need to always include solar, we need to include wind, and I mean, it's not going away, it's something that's going to be there, and I think technology is pushing that way as well, of saying, hey, we've got to include all of these things. So what do you see kind of from your side, or what do you anticipate over the next few years, let's say tech-wise, let's say energy space-wise?
Across the board?
Yeah.
I mean, I think even with if we keep it to upstream oil and gas, I think there's going to be an increased focus on ESG and the energy transition. And when we say energy transition, it doesn't have to be this dirty, scary term. I think it just means, well, let me give you an example actually of what the energy transition is. It's not just having a defunct natural gas well sit there and do nothing. It's repurposing that to mine Bitcoin.
Just getting ready to say that.
I mean, literally, that's an example.
Like,
like, that's a company that people are starting, have started, will start, that will get major funding and investment, because that's what energy transition fundamentally means. It's, okay, so we can look at this differently. Like, these are all existing assets that we thought were just dead. So oil and gas is actually perfectly positioned to take advantage of the energy transition because of all of the existing assets in play, right? So, I mean, I came across a company last week that they're turning cow manure into energy. I'm not even sure how they do it. It must smell terrible, but they've got a process, and these scientists in Vienna have figured this out, and they turn cow shit into energy. So it's like, well, okay, so you're an oil and gas company, and some of these oil and gas companies also own ranches and all this other land and real estate. Well, why don't we turn the cow poop into energy? Why don't we do Bitcoin mining over here? You know, there's so much. Why don't we capture carbon this way, right, in a more creative fashion? Right. And now they're leading the charge. So I think oil and gas will be, if they're willing to embrace the energy transition motto and concept, will be the biggest beneficiaries. I think that what will challenge this industry is people are, well, we're an oil company. Right. Like, this is what we are, this is what we've done. It's like, great, but moving forward, there's going to be things that need to happen to kind of take care of the broader spectrum. And the industry's positioned very well to do it, especially upstream.
That is amazing. I mean, and it's one of those things of where it's kind of cool on like LinkedIn and everything to see some of these bigger companies where they say, hey, we're going green, we're focusing on making some sort of a transition to go green. And I'm like, you have to accept that as a reality of, number one, it's not going away. Number two, it's like you will get left behind if you don't make some sort of like motion to move forward. And you've got to find ways to be able to do that. And for anyone that is like, just, this is the line that they're drawing, and they're like I cannot believe that anybody would do that. And I still hear somebody, like, we'll go to different conferences and things, I hear people say, we're not ready to make any sort of commitment yet. And I'm like, I get it, stick to your guns, but there is so much out there. And where you're talking about the Bitcoin mining of transitioning old wells into things like that, that's that forward thinking that the people in our industry that I'm so passionate about, these are the ones that are coming up with ideas like that, and those are the companies that are going to thrive. I mean, absolutely thrive.
That stuff to me is awesome. Like,
no, it is.
Like it's exciting. I would be excited if I was an oil and gas operator and I had these legacy gas wells. I mean, EQT, the amount of things they could do with their 30, 40 some odd thousand wells that they must have, diversified gas, right? They're probably having meetings right now talking about how can we be more creative and be on the forefront of this energy transition and give real tangible stories, because it doesn't feel tangible yet, right?
No, it
so
doesn't.
Give us
That's
examples.
The biggest thing.
Like what do you mean? Right? What exactly does that mean? And ESG, I think, is a little bit different, right? I think that's a fundamental value that organizations need to have, and there will be scores that are,
right.
But again, to me, that's a little bit less confusing. Energy transfer or transition sounds to me like getting away from oil and gas, and we have to really understand that's not what's going on.
It's not going away.
It's not what's going on.
It's not going away. Like nobody's shutting these things down or actively like. They want to make a transition, but this is not an overnight process. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up. If they're like, they want to turn it off on a Friday and we're going to, turn the solar panels on
to the
Monday.
left.
Yeah, exactly. The need is there. The need's always going to be there. And it's these people that are going to help move that into the right direction. So no,
I'm excited. I'm excited.
I definitely am too. And I think that's one of those things where, like, I look at, you see companies like Chesapeake where they grow so big, and then there's, it definitely sees a decrease in production and staff size and everything. And like, we look in Oklahoma City and we're like, man, we want more of these companies to be able to come in and thrive. Denver the same way, Midland the same way. You see the change. And like, I look at it as there is opportunity here for new, exciting, large companies to come in this energy space and to be able to make a huge impact on economy and everything else.
Amazon Web Services, I think, is uniquely positioned, right? They've got this, the OSDU, I think it's called, right? Where they're taking subsurface data and making it available kind of in a more real-time manner. And they've got the horsepower to go behind it and start pushing these sorts of initiatives. I mean, I've told some of the leaders over there, Amazon should be an operator. All they do is everything efficient, right? And make the most of every possible opportunity and think customer first. Well, the customer in this case is the earth, people, whatever, right? Let's keep it clean, but also keep it efficient and use every aspect of the kind of energy ecosystem. And we'll see. I think Amazon's more unafraid than some of the others to stake their claim and say, we're not getting involved in the politics of whatever it is. We like money.
Right.
And this is going to be here, so let's play with that. Google stepped out, right? I think Microsoft embraces, but not actively.
Right.
Whereas Amazon's just like, we're going to go deep into this thing. This is real business.
It's amazing.
Energy is not going away.
It's not. It's only going to get more exciting, I think, in the next few years. So whenever we look forward thinking, Funk Futures, like this is your company. This is like your baby of what you've built up, and you've done incredibly well with it. You've continued to grow this out, and again, just like how I heard initially, very well connected, very well involved with these different companies. What are you looking for in doing with your company, and what are you hoping for in the next few years?
God, man, I can't even think about the next day, let alone 2-3 years. But no, there's some plans, there's some thought processes, and it definitely does involve technology. But Funk Futures, it really, I mean, for me, it's I do care a lot about the network that I've built over the last 14 years in oil and gas software. I think I've been into maybe 300 or so different oil and gas companies' offices. Like, I'd put it out there that I probably have gone into as many oil and gas companies' offices
as anybody, for sure,
over the last 10 years, right? I don't know who else even needs to do that, but for whatever reason, I do. So I have a pretty good feel and understanding of the cultures of companies, of the tech forwardness, of the general culture of these organizations. And it was just becoming really hard for me to work for a single company and have a single product or a couple of products that cut out like 80 or 90% of my contact base.
Right.
So I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, I fundamentally understand what could provide value for each of these disciplines within the organization. Why not align with best of breed energy technology and energy consulting companies that can bring that value to various organizations? And it started with, okay, it's just me, right? I'll take you to my contacts and I'll sell for you. But quickly realized there's a demand for fractional sales and marketing the same way that there is to have a fractional CFO or CIO. In some cases, for these energy tech companies, more, because they've taken on some level of funding and they're technical. They don't know how to sell. So how do I package this? How do I market it, brand it, present it, contract it, right? I mean, all these things that may be second nature to us, but that's not everybody that runs or owns an energy tech company.
For sure.
So for me, aligning with these companies that are best of breed, that are probably underserved in the market. So a lot of smaller companies, some that are established, maybe in a different country, and want to test the market over here or bring their solutions here and see what will fit.
Right.
Identify strategic partnerships between organizations. So I don't know, like it's become a company. Like, I have people working right now, an executive assistant and a lead generation resource, and I'm going to bring on another kind of young sales guy to learn the ropes and become Gino's proxy. So I'm tremendously excited about what Funk Futures is doing from a contract sales and marketing perspective. But we do other things too. I mean, the idea is that we probably shouldn't be in there for more than a year and a half, realistically, because at that point you should most likely bring in a full-time resource. Right. Sure. And anything less than 6 months is a challenge, because I mean, sales cycles generally take a little while, even for transactional systems, right? So to get set up and then get meetings and all that, it's likely a 6-month process to start. And if we both like each other, we keep going. But recruiting and placement to possibly replace us as we move out, to put in the right resources as companies get off the ground and scale, is something we'd like to do, as well as acquisitions and white label agreements, right? If somebody has amazing technology, just doesn't seem to be selling the way it wants, well, would it be better if it sat underneath an Amazon Web Services or Schlumberger or Landmark or whoever, right? So try to think creatively about how the best systems can get to the market as a whole. And then I think we'll dabble a little bit on the technology side. Like I said, we have some ideas for being able to bring additional data sets to the oil and gas industry, not like in the Enverus or Well database sense, but probably more of a sales-focused sense. So we'll get to all that.
So if a company's watching this that hasn't met you or hasn't experienced like what you have to offer, kind of give like an overview of like what's the main thing that you would be coming into their business to help them with? Yeah,
I mean, I think first and foremost it's marketing and sales.
Okay.
Right? So we want to do everything from setting up meetings to doing presentations if needed, having people come on my podcast, Tripping Over the Barrel, right?
Needed to mention that, Tripping Over the Barrel. Yes, excellent podcast.
Thanks. A LinkedIn exposure, possibly suggesting areas where they want to present themselves and market themselves, helping set up webinars and then driving attendance to those webinars, social events.
Very cool.
You name it, right? So just a means of creating some of that buzz around the organization, but then of course, through my network, getting some of those meetings, but also through demand generation, cold calling, like testing the full market. Like if you tell me you have a product and people don't know about it, like we're a great place to get. I mean, within 6 months,
we're going to make sure
your target market, your personas will be tested. Like at a minimum, we'll take best of breed practices and messaging and bring that solution to market, and certainly not be embarrassing for you, right? Because I think I see a lot of companies just turning sales guys over. I think the number in my mind is something like I don't know, 80% of salespeople fail. And I hate to say it, but I've been in some sales companies and situations where I've been in the 80% that fail. I've also been in the 20%. So it's a big risk for an organization to take on a salesperson, to train them, to stay committed to them over time if the sales don't happen or if it's a down market, versus like with us, we'll just do a short-term agreement and you spend a fixed amount of money and you can decide if it worked and you want to continue or if you didn't, right? We'll understand what you're doing. You rip that Band-Aid off and we just go at it, right? So awesome. I think it's a little bit of quicker to market. Like you could probably hire someone and in 6 or 7 months or a year, you'll get to the same people, but we'll get you there a little bit quicker and we'll get your brand out there a little bit sooner with the right types of people.
That's fantastic. And kind of what we've talked about too with this of piecemealing things together, finding the things that work, and for a company that needs somebody to market, to get to sales, and say, hey, we don't need to hire somebody full time. We could bring him on, like we could bring Funk Futures on, and they could take care of this, and we could see results from it, and that's fantastic. Yeah,
I mean that's the goal, right? I mean we'd really love to take on companies that feel like they have something, they're underserved in the market, or even if it's like a transition. We've had 2 VPs of sales, it's not really working. What are we doing, right? We don't want this third to then be a bust. Well, let's take sort of an intermediary route, try something a little bit different, and we'll help you find your next head of sales.
That's awesome,
right? Or if you hate me, then tell me to go and don't hire my VP of sales. But I mean, that's sort of the gamut we're running. And my mentor, Abe Shasha, sort of the inventor of this thing. He's been doing sales consulting, contract sales and marketing since 2006, 2007. And he was saying to me, even as of 2016, 17, he's like, look, like you really understand energy tech across the board and you have people that like you and will buy stuff from you. You need to do this. So the seed had been planted. I think the time had to come together, the market had to be right, and we're able to sort of hit the gas a couple months ago.
Well, from what I know, and I know it's still very brief, but from what I know about you, you're a sincere person. You're somebody that really cares about what you're doing, and a little bit. And it really seems like you're firing on all cylinders right now. So, like, I mean, we wish you the absolute best with this, and I can't think of anything but just amazing success for you.
Thank you.
The main thing that before we leave, how will the Red Sox end the season, and how will my Cubs do? And like, let's give the 5-minute breakdown of this. And leave it on that note, because we're both big baseball fans. I think that was the first thing. If whenever we talked on the phone the first few times, I probably could have made a 7 or 8 hour stint of just talking baseball with you. But long time, lifelong Red Sox fan.
Yeah,
obviously been to not Wrigley, but been to
Fenway.
Been to Fenway hundreds of times, I'm sure.
Took batting practice at Fenway.
Oh my gosh.
Like the highlight, I'll show you the video after. I hit some pretty good.
That is awesome.
Yeah, when I was like 35. Yeah, I mean, really, to that point, like probably the 4th best day of my life besides like my 2 kids being born and my wedding.
Right.
So now it's gotten pushed down because we had another kid. I got a lot of kids.
It just keeps going down.
I got a lot of kids. I don't have time to take batting practice at Fenway like I used to. How does the season end? I mean, the Sox I really like Alex Cora as a manager.
Yeah.
The Sox I think they have the best record in baseball, like as of this recording.
They're doing pretty solid. I don't want to jinx them. I mean, I'll knock on wood. I want to help you out
here. But they're like ahead of schedule. They got this young GM. They brought in Bloom from the Devil Rays, Tampa. So he obviously built that team. He knows what he's doing.
For sure.
He's already made some great moves. Like, they're pretty good, man. When they start off the season like this, the last few times they've started like this, they've won the World Series. I don't know if that's in the cards for them this year, but also like they were pretty bad last year. It was sort of a throwaway year for them.
Last year,
they're trying to get under payroll. Like they should make the playoffs, and they should be a threat. But I can't say that they're...
Did you go to any, when they went to the World Series, did you go to any World Series games?
I haven't been to World Series games, but I did go to... Whenever they have, like, whenever they win the division and have guaranteed, like, home playoff baseball games, I'll always go back.
Totally go.
For those games, yeah.
So, like, with the Cubs, I was such a fan for, like, my whole life. And whenever I started making enough money to where I could, like get out and go do my own thing, I was like... At least one time a year, I'm going to fly up there and watch a game. And so I would fly up there and
Let's go.
I'm in. I'm totally in. I would pay whatever it cost to get as close as I could. And one year I got to sit on the front row right next to the Cubs, like pitching, the warm-up spot. And so I was like face to face, and I can't remember the different pitchers that was going. But the reason I'm telling you that story is I went up there 12 years in a row, and I saw 12 losses in a row.
No, wow, holy crap!
I didn't see one raising the W flamp. So finally, after 12 years, I went and they won, and it was like a just crappy game on a Tuesday. There was nobody there, and it was like they won the World Series and I was watching Game 7. I was losing my mind. But, oh man, such good memories with all that stuff.
I would have lost my mind if my team was in Game 7 of the World Series and they had a rain delay in extra innings. And you're like, what the hell is... I was like, this must be bizarro world for these fans. For me, it was just annoying because I wanted to go to bed. But... And I didn't really care who won because it was they were both downtrodden franchises. Sure. I like the Theo factor. The Cubs, I feel have more of a synergy.
I think Theo goes down as one of the greatest GMs of all time.
Yeah, he's Hall of Famer.
Two programs.
The two. The cursed two. And he also built the Red Sox well after he left. He took Mookie Betts and some other guys. He was awesome. Awesome.
I was so whenever he went to Chicago, I was like, whoa, there's something here. This might happen.
Time was right too. He did what he needed to do. He was realizing in Boston it wasn't going to get better.
Right. No, leave on a high note for sure.
He'd want us to.
No, and where you're saying the Game 7 rain delay and everything. So this maybe this shows what type of a Cub fan I am. But there was a part of me in there that I was like, I don't want him to win this.
Oh my God.
I don't want him to win this because this has been something that my granddad talked about and my dad talked about of, it's the ongoing gag. It's in Back to the Future. It's all this stuff of Cubs, lovable losers, never going to win it. And whenever I was like, I can't let my heart go and they actually win this because then what? What happens now? But I was in a good place. It was fantastic. It was one of the highlights of my life for sure.
Man. That's just beautiful. So good story about this. 2004. I just met my girlfriend. I guess she became my wife, now mother of my kids and all that. But myself and my roommates from New Hampshire, huge Sox fans. Sox go down to the Yankees and then start coming back and winning and. She never got to see me because these games were 6 hours long or whatever against the Yankees. So stressful. And it was finally becoming kind of obvious that they were going to win, right? They win, had a great time. And then I got up the next morning. I'm like, oh, so I still have to go to work and stuff? I thought that was just it, right? So I was complaining. She's like, what are you complaining about? Your dream came true last night. I'm like, whatever. So I go to work at a job I'm making 80 phone calls a day at or whatever. And, front desk is like, hey, you've got something here. So there's two Red Sox and they're stuffed with something. So I grabbed them and brought them back to my desk and it was like a bacon, sausage, egg and cheese bagel and and a Snapple and a note from my girlfriend, now my wife, that was congrats on your dream come true with the Red Sox. I'm
marry that girl. And
I was like, that's it. I'm gonna marry her.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And on that note, that's a positive story. Yeah, good way to end it. So happy you came on this.
Thanks, brother.
Really appreciate this. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way that they can reach out?
Yeah, for sure. Hit up the website, www.funkfutures.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I accept most invitations. I'm very active on there. Jeremy at funkfutures.com. But for sure, hit up the website. The podcast is on the Digital Wildcatters platform. It's called Tripping Over the Barrel. We have entertaining guests. You're going to have to come on mine now. So this was fun to be on the other side. Sure. But yeah, Tripping Over the Barrel on Digital Wildcatters, Funk Futures. Check us out.
Hey, thank you all for watching another episode of Listen Up. We're really thankful for Jeremy for coming on today. And until next time, I'm Drew.